There were a great many people dedicating themselves to the complete destruction of Great Britain and everything it stood for. Counterintelligence agencies like SMERSH in the Soviet Union and the Special Activities Committee of the People's Liberation Army in China. Or rogue elements, including Nazis who still refused to believe that their precious Third Reich hadn't quite made its promised 1,000 years. You had to fight fire with fire, which meant that there was an urgent need for men, and women for that matter, who would be prepared to kill if only in self-defense. Death was part of the job, and like it or not, there would be times when the service would have to strike first, when a state-sponsored assassination would be the only answer to a particular threat. M could not have his hands tied. He was the one making the decisions, and he had to know that he could act with impunity. The license was as much for him as it was for the people he commanded. The 00 section had been kept deliberately small. In fact, after this recent loss, it was now down to just 2 men, 008 and 0011. M had always rejected the idea of there being a sequence, 001, 002, 003, and so on. Patterns in any shape or form are the enemy of counterintelligence. Tanner wondered how quickly 007 would be replaced. What exactly happened? M reached for his pipe, which rested next to the ashtray made out of a 12-inch shell base that never left his desk. "We still don't have all the details, sir," Tanner replied. "As you know, we sent 007 to the south of France a little over 3 weeks ago. He was investigating the activity of the Corsican underworld in the area, or rather, the lack of activity. Someone had noticed a sharp drop in the supply of drugs coming out of Marseille, and the natural assumption was that they must be up to something else. These Corsicans are loud and unpleasant, really nothing more than modern-day gangsters with fancy names and a proclivity for violence. Joseph Ranucci, John Paul Scipio, the Guarini brothers, to name just a few. Up until now, they've had none of the discipline of the Unione Siciliana or even the Unione Corsa, but that's exactly the point. This silence is worrying. If they've managed to organize themselves, that could make them a danger, not just to the immediate area, but to the whole of Europe, and, inevitably, us." Yes. M had all the information in the cavernous filing cabinet that was his mind, and didn't need it paraded in front of him now. 007 went in undercover. We gave him a new name, new passport, and an address in Nice. He was an academic working out of University College, writing a history of organized labor. That allowed him to ask all the right questions without raising too many eyebrows. At least that was the idea. Part of the trouble is that the police, and that includes the SDECE, are riddled with informers. We thought he'd have a better chance on his own. Did he come up with anything? Before he was killed? Yes, sir. The Chief of Staff cleared his throat. It seems there was a woman involved. There always is. M growled into the bowl of his pipe. It's not quite what you're thinking, sir. 007 mentioned her in what would turn out to be his last radio transmission. He referred to her as Madame 16. 16? A number? Yes, sir. It's not her real name, of course. You'll know her as Joanne Brochet. French father, English mother, started life in Paris before the First War and then moved to London where she grew up. She spent 3 years at Bletchley Park working in the indexing hut before she was selected by Special Operations, who trained her up and parachuted her into France under the code name 16. Tanner spelled it out. She was very highly regarded by both F Section and the Deuxième Bureau, and there's no doubt that she provided us with some useful intelligence in the build-up to Operation Overlord. She was captured and tortured by the Germans, and after that she disappeared. We assumed, of course, that she'd been killed, but she turned up again a few years ago working in Europe, and by then she'd managed to lose her entire history, age, name, nationality, and all the rest of it. She called herself 16, or Madam 16, and she'd gone into business for herself. She was the woman who sold us the Kosovo file. Tanner nodded. Both men knew what he was talking about. The Kosovo file was a feasibility study that had been put together by a low-grade civil servant with too much time on his hands and, worse still, a heightened imagination. It set out in detail the strategy to incite and support an armed uprising in Albania, which had become a communist state after the war. There was never any chance that the plan would be given a green light, but the file had gone into minute detail, identifying all the local operatives along with royalists and the expatriates who might have lent themselves to the cause. The Kosovo file should have been shredded the moment its existence was known. Instead, it had been photostated and circulated, and then, unbelievably, a young man working as third secretary at the Prague embassy had left a briefcase with a copy under his seat one evening when he got off a tram. We never found out how 16 got her hands on it.